Hey, welcome back to It's Time We Talked, the official podcast of Beacon. Here, we cover everything at the intersection of community and technology, with all kinds of guests that share a common devotion to building a better world. This week, we are excited to introduce Fél Marquez, Director of Development for the Asheville Racial Justice Coalition. The Asheville Racial Justice Coalition, or RJC, is, quote, a broad-based alliance of individuals and organizations committed to addressing systemic racism and state-sanctioned violence against Black people and those impacted by poverty, criminalization, and mass incarceration, quote. Learn more at their website, rjcavl.org, and please donate to support their work if you can. We are thrilled to welcome Fél onto the show and get the latest on the RJC's critical community work. Listen in as Fél and Jared discuss systemic racism, reparations, and how to bring about change and accountability. This episode is complete with avenues for our listeners and members to get involved. So sit back, enjoy, and if you feel so moved, take action.
Well, hello, Fél.
Hi, Jared.
Welcome to It's Time We Talked. This is the official podcast of Beacon.
Okay.
We're super excited to have you here.
Okay, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very excited. I've watched the inception of Beacon
That's
to now, and so it's a really beautiful thing to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. I guess I should introduce Fél. Fél is dear friend, former landmate, and the Director of Development for the Asheville Racial Justice Coalition.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Again, I'm Fél. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Development for the Racial Justice Coalition. Former landmates. So just really happy to be connecting, talking a little bit about what RJC does, and just kind of getting into it today.
Well, we're thrilled to have you here.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it then. I guess for starters, why don't you say a little bit about who you are?
Okay, yeah. So my name's Fél, which I already said.
You covered that. It's good to let everyone know.
Yeah, and I'm originally from the San Francisco East Bay. So I was born in Hayward. I grew up in Oakland. I went to Mills College. And I learned about Asheville when I lived in Oakland. I was going to Mills. My former farm manager, she was from Asheville. She's now the farm manager for Warren Wilson. So She made her way back. But she talked about the mountains and how beautiful they are and her experience growing up here. And so when I graduated, I wanted to leave California and I wanted to leave the West Coast. I wanted to move somewhere new. And so I moved here in 49 hours and 5 years ago now. And I found myself in the mountains. And I think that some people have had really tough transitions to the mountains, but the mountains just embraced me. The communities here just embraced me. I feel really blessed that I found myself in Southern Appalachia and just very grateful for all of the people that I've met along the way, the farmers, the activists, the baristas, everybody. So yeah, it's a little bit about me and my journey into getting into Asheville.
Great. And when you say 49 hours, do you mean you decided and moved all in one 49-hour period?
So I was having a manic breakdown.
Okay.
And I had just graduated. I was sleeping in my car, sleeping on friends' couches. I was lifting, Ubering, door dashing. I had an internship that was unpaid. And I was just like, I cannot be here. So I found a job in Asheville working on a farm. And then I only had enough money to rent a car for 49 hours.
Okay. That's 49 hours.
Yeah, so I could afford a car for 49 hours. And this was all within a week. I sold all my stuff and left and then moved to Asheville. I'd never been here before. But it just felt like the mountains were calling.
The mountains called me. They called me too. That's
the
what
mountains
happens.
were like, you have to come.
They say, drop everything, get over here.
Yes, and it was within 1 week. I was in California at the start, and at the end, I was no Wi-Fi, living in a chicken coop on a small little farm.
Right.
Yeah.
And the adventure began again.
Yeah.
And now look at where you are.
I know.
Awesome.
Yeah, life is beautiful like that.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Yeah,
It was great to get to know you in those early days too.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey. So, I mean, kind of moving into my journey with the Racial Justice Coalition. So, I was working for a lot of nonprofit agriculture, doing a lot of volunteer work with different kinds of nonprofits, different sectors of nonprofits. My background is in sociology. I did a lot of health equity work back in California around racial equity, food apartheid areas, different forms of economic development.
Could I just stop you? Could
Yeah.
you go into what food apartheid is for those who might not be aware?
Yeah, so you see the term food desert a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that that is more so the mainstream term that you see around areas that don't have access to what we deem healthy. Healthy is just such a broad word, but healthy, equitable, nourishing food. So fresh produce, fresh fruits and vegetables, local meats, local dairy products, also just like ownership over the process around the way that food is distributed and grown. So you see food desert because you're like, oh, it's a barren landscape. There's not this like fresh food available, but deserts are an actual habitat. And they're very abundant.
Right, they provide food for their inhabitants.
They're an ecosystem. So instead of saying shaming deserts, which are their own ecosystems, we say food apartheid because areas that lack healthy, nourishing food, it's very systemic and it's very intentional to ensure that those communities are oppressed through lack of resources.
Right. Okay, well, we might get back into that a little bit later, but so that's how, that was your general interest that led you towards RJC?
So I moved here. I was doing a lot of nonprofit farming, a lot of agricultural farming, and then I got a job doing tax and wealth management, which you were there for that process, which I learned a lot more about economic development. But within those years, I started volunteering for the Racial Justice Coalition. So I joined their solidarity circles and I started to really learn about the Black community here in Asheville and the ways that the Black community had been severely impacted and continues to be impacted by urban renewal. I learned about all of the different multiracial collaborations and activism movements happening in Southern Appalachia through the Solidarity Circle. The Solidarity Circle really started for me in 2019, 2020 is when I joined because during the pandemic, we were so isolated from one another. The Solidarity Circle was meeting once a week, once every other week, and it was just like a group of us, and it was just a really sweet time where we're sharing resources, knowledge, stories, and of course, during 2020 is when Black Lives Matters riots were protests, riots, marches.
Sure. We can talk about all the different
ways.
But
that was happening, and so that really also pushed me and started learning more about RJC and the work that had been happening for at least 6 years at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So RJC had already started. Okay. And what was the inspiration for RJC first coming together?
Yeah, so the Racial Justice Coalition really started as a true coalition. So in 2014, with the murder of Michael Brown, 16 nonprofits in Western North Carolina came together. A majority of them were white-led, or, there were definitely Black-led nonprofits as well, but majority were white-led and community nonprofits that had been here for a long time and were recognizing and coming to this place of, okay, how do we center racial equity and racial justice in the way that our nonprofit moves? A lot of these nonprofits were coming to terms with the fact that they had caused harm to the Black community. And instead of focusing on their mission statement to provide services, to be these spaces that were providing care, they were negatively impacting this long-lasting community that has been here. And so how they were going to start the process of unlearning their anti-Blackness and really starting to center racial equity. So it was just a coalition that met regularly in the community. We're really learning how to better support the Black community. In 2019, we had our first hire, which is Rob Thomas, our executive director. And so he was a community liaison between the Black community and the RJC, those 16 coalition supporters. In 2020, with the rise of Black Lives Matter movement and Asheville being the first city in the Southeast to start the commitment to reparations, Buncombe County as a whole to start the process of commitment to reparations, that's when RJC really launched itself as its own nonprofit, its own identity. We now have 19 coalition supporters. We still interact with our coalition supporters. We still have solidarity circles. But with the launch of the Black Lives Matter movement, with the launch of commitment to reparations, RJC has kind of pivoted to really supporting the City Reparations Commission, really diving into local politics and really focusing on that kind of deep racial equity systemic work.
Sure. Systemic work with a local focus, because you're holding Asheville accountable for the promises that they made.
Yeah, 100%. And, it is a local focus, and we're connected nationally. We have a national network of other places starting their reparations movement. We support other places in the reparations process. We are connected to international reparations movements. So our team really sees this as a local process, but also with an international lens. So reparations isn't just for Asheville. What we do impacts the larger global scale.
Right. And I feel like there's a reckoning to be taken on the national level. There's federal money that eventually should come down into this process, and there's local money. And I think this ground swelling from localities upwards is going to be really effective, because it'll let folks actually decide where the money's going.
Yes.
Kind of going back on what you were saying with centering Black people in these conversations and in this work. And you mentioned a lot of harm that had been done by these white-led nonprofits in the past. I think that's a huge piece of what RJC is doing, and a huge piece of what Beacon wants to do, is that the people who know best how to handle these problems, how to make change, they're the ones on the front lines. We don't need white-led coalitions coming into Black neighborhoods and saying, hey, we have a solution for you. We need to empower people of color to, they already have the solutions. A lot of the time they just need the kind of money that white circles automatically have access to. So
no, 100%. And when we think of reparations movement, a lot of what I've seen in media is, this is brand new. But that's not true. From the inception of the United States after the Civil War, within the first year, reparations was one of the first conversations that Abraham Lincoln brought to the table. And so reparations was always a conversation. In 1989, the H.R. 40 bill, which was a reparations bill to bring it on a federal level, was enacted. It's been stalled for like 40 years now. But I think people think it's this it is a grassroots movement, because the people who are pushing it forward are people in the front line. And it is a multiracial community that wants this for the Black community. But it's grassroots people who are pushing the front line, because the government has to be held accountable for the ways that it has stalled bills out like this, that it continues to do harm. Connecting with organizations like Beacon, who want to support this kind of work and really, push out these movements through social media, through online networking, because that's a huge tool. AI and social media really promotes that work. So it's really cool to get to network with so many rad organizations that we just want to support one another in our movement work.
Sure, and let people actually help the people who are doing the work, instead of donating to some giant organization or some national cause. Find the people who are doing the work where they are. That's why we're focusing on bringing people on in the Asheville area, specifically in Yancey County, so we can get something robust going here. I wanted to go back to what you were saying about how it's taken so long, and just talk about reparations for a little longer, even though there's other stuff we want to talk about. But I hear some people saying it's been such a long time, how do we know who even deserves it at this point? And I feel like it doesn't matter if your ancestor was a slave or not. Being a person of color in this country, you're facing the same systemic racism that was in play back then. So I feel like it should just be anybody who's a person of color in America. But yeah.
To be honest, I tend to like stay out of those conversations as like a non-Black person, because I feel like that is like a tension that I don't necessarily understand. But I agree with you in the sense that the African diaspora, the Black community, is a global community, and what Black people have faced in the U.S. is also what's happened in Brazil, which has happened in Angola, which has happened in Mozambique. And so, I really want to see an international reparations movement that acknowledges all the harms that have happened outside of what the United States has done. Like, the U.S. is a byproduct of European colonialism.
Sure.
So, like, to me, I want to take it to, like, European countries need to acknowledge their aspect in oppressing and enacting a lot of violence on African nations. And I want to see the Brazilian government be accountable to its enslaved descendants. I really do see it as any person of Black ancestry isn't, I don't know, like, entitled and deserve is like such a tricky word, but to me it's like, no, violent governments have oppressed your ancestry. And then, pushing out like outside of like Black communities, I think Indigenous communities, I think queer communities, I think, Jewish communities, I think Islamic communities, I think Palestinian communities. Like, I see a lot of communities that have been violently oppressed. And I don't think that enslavement, like, that stopped in like 18, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, even if you look at it, like, contextualized outside of the US, Portugal left Angola and Mozambique in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1960s is when they left their colony.
Mm-hmm.
And the United Kingdom, Britain, still has colonies.
Right.
The U.S. has territories, which are colonies. And so if we want to say, well, enslavement stopped, okay, but colonization did, and it still hasn't.
Sure.
And the practices of racialized violence also never stopped, and it still happens. So you can't deny these government policies, and you can't deny these structures in place because they're there.
Right. And just because it's not legally called slavery anymore, if you come into somebody's land, you privatize that land, and then say, if you don't work for dollars or money, then you don't get a home and you don't get food.
Yeah.
I mean, effectively, you have no choice. You have to work, or you're going to die, or your loved ones are not going to have a way of life.
Exactly.
So it's the free market. It's the choice, but what's the choice? The choice is starve or cooperate.
Exactly.
And cooperate usually means oppression for most of the globe.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew we'd get into it. All right. Well, let's go back to RJC now and talk about, speaking of reparations in Asheville, like, what is the work that RJC specifically is doing currently? What are the campaigns you're focused on?
Yeah, so we do have, right now we launched a campaign. So we launched a campaign a few months ago, our Reparations Are Due campaign. And so our Reparations Are Due campaign, we have a pledge. So, people can go on our website, sign our pledge. Our goal is to get 5,000 signers. We're at close to 2,000 right now. So we've done pretty good. I would say, like, pretty happy about that. A team of 10,
Sure.
But, the Reparations Are Due campaign is definitely more than a pledge. It is us really showing solidarity and support to our City Reparations Commission. So our Reparations Commission is comprised of 26 local Black leaders, and they're amazing Black leaders from different historically Black neighborhoods, or they, maybe moved here, but they all have 5 specific focus areas. So when Asheville committed to reparations and the reparations process, it was to 5 specific focus areas.
Okay.
So we have economic development, health and wellness, education, transportation, and criminal justice.
Okay.
And so those 5 focus areas, those 26 people are then broken up into those 5 focus areas. So you have about 5 to 6 people probably within each of those groups.
Okay.
And there are continuous reparations commissions meetings where they're discussing what the proposals are for those 5 areas. Asheville committed, I think, anywhere from like $2 to $6 million to be funneled within those areas based off of those proposals.
Okay.
And so what RJC has done for the last 2-3 years is before our reparations are due campaign, we have our Every Black Voice campaign. And this campaign is started off, and we're currently in the qualitative data analysis area, but we did over 230 interviews to local Black community members, and we did qualitative interviews and gathered all of that data, and now we're in the coding process. And based off of those interviews, which were all focused on how do you want to see reparations in your community? What would feel just and the start of accountability? Those aren't the actual questions, but that's basically what, kind of the spirit of it, exactly. Based off of all that data, we are going to then give that to the City Reparations Commission. And based off of all of that data, they will be able to create data-driven recommendations, not just what they deem could be like important, but this is from community members. This is data driven based off of what folks would like to see that money go to.
Sure. And this is starting a conversation about it. So it's not just happening in a vacuum.
Yes.
So it's in a dialogue with the communities that are going to be receiving this money.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the community participatory research, we paid every interview. Every interviewee, we pay them a little bit. And then also we make that research available when it's done on our website. We did an additional research project in 2020 to 2021, which is also on our website. It was around public transportation and public housing.
Sure.
But our Every Black Voice campaign, also we do Black community events, we do education around reparations, we do a lot of community building, not just with Black community members, but within multiracial communities. And it's kind of going in tandem now with our Reparations Are Due campaign. So the Every Black Voice campaign was a lot of community building, a lot of trust building, which will always be happening. Our Every Black Voice campaign is more so moving into like programming, community outreach. And our Reparations Are Due campaign, we're kind of just really moving into reparations education and pledge signing, showing up, networking, and ensuring that Asheville will actually be held accountable for the commitment that it made. I know I just said like so many things.
It's great. I'm so impressed that you've got it all down. You're not repeating. It's just like these are all really important things. And it's why I love RJC specifically, because I feel like what y'all do is take these huge ideas like reparations and then you break them down into actionable chunks. And you actually go to the people who are involved and you create a strategy and you get the input and then you make you're doing this one step at a time in a way that's actually going to bring about some serious change. So I think that the level of detail is fantastic. So
thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I really, as a director of development, that's the long-term strategy. Like, I can't take credit for that.
Sure.
For me, I do grant research, supporting our grant manager. I do fundraising, donor development. I do networking building, and I also, work with our bookkeeper, financial and narrative storytelling. And obviously our team is small and this community is small but mighty. And so, I help assist with event planning, I assist our programming, but I just want to shout out my team.
Sure.
I want to shout out our executive director, Rob Thomas. I want to shout out the Black community here, and I want to shout out our multiracial allies who are just really down for the cause and are very loyal to the journey, because RJC, we're not perfect. We don't know what we're doing a lot of the time, but we do it with intention. So
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all on uncharted waters here.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting out of dangerous water. So, I think there's a lot of grace to be had in figuring this out. Well, so let's, I'm sure everybody listening now at this point is wondering, what can they do to get involved and help?
Yeah, I think there's so many things you can do.
Right. That's why we love RJC, because they will let you get involved in the way that it works for you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, always going to start with financials, because I'm the director of development and money is a real thing. I think people have big feelings around money. Money is either an inherent evil or, it's just a necessity. I think that it's just a resource. It's a tool to ensure long-term sustainability for the work that we do. Just like I'm sure you feel probably similarly with Beacon, like money is a resource and it has real consequences when you have it or don't have it.
Yes.
And so, donating to RJC, and if you can't do a financial donation, connecting us to businesses, to corporations, to philanthropic entities that are interested in reparations work, who are interested in long-term sustainability around our movement work. Outside of financials, if you are interested in volunteering and you want to support a reparations are due campaign, if you want to give us legal advice, if you want to support our strategy, our long-term sustainability, if you want to just create graphics for us, if you want to support us creating maybe not our own podcast, but something in that way.
Content.
Content.
Content. You need content is currency.
Yes.
You can help people create content. It's helpful.
No, it's very helpful. And also, we've talked about this a little bit, but our social media is not great.
Sure.
Yeah, that is not where we invested time. It's definitely something we're interested in. I'm bringing on a content creator, a creative director, but, in reality, RJC is just so people-driven and so focused on this, conversations. And I think that's also a Southern thing, is taking time to just build meaningful relationships, not just, our social media looks great, so you should take us seriously.
Sure.
We have a lot of people will back us up just because of the time and attention that we give to our communities. But yeah, content creation, that's a full-time job and we don't always have the capacity for it. So, also when we do share stuff, share our stuff, learn about reparations movements happening in your area. Mm-hmm. If you don't live in Asheville or within Western North Carolina, learn about the reparations happening in your area. And there are reparations task force in California, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Oklahoma. So, there's movements happening everywhere. And so tapping into your local one, seeing what you can do. Also, just if you are interested in racial justice, read some books, some podcasts, educate yourself so that people who are trying to get these laws passed do not have to keep taking our time to
explain why. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that was the big awakening of 2020 was a much larger percentage of the population became aware that these changes are needed, that dramatic change is needed. And it was okay, so then we all started to educate ourselves.
Yes.
And that was 3 years ago. So now, if you haven't educated yourself yet, if you're still why reparations? Is police brutality such a big problem or a bad thing? It is. Do the research. There's a lot out there. You can find it. You can figure it out.
Yes.
Now the question is, what do we do? So I think, yes, definitely take the time to educate yourself, everybody. And then the next question is, and how can I help?
Yeah.
So that's a great long list of things that people can do.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, and also if reparations movements aren't happening in your area, let's say that the community you live in, maybe there is the indigenous communities that you can be supporting, the migrant communities, the refugee communities. People don't want to talk about this, but there's a lot of diversity within veteran communities. People don't really talk about that either. And so I would just say that there are so many communities that you could be tapping into. Get to know your neighbors, get to know the people you live around, because conversations and connection is really, for me, the root of solidarity and the root of learning how to care for one another. Our differences are what make us strong.
Sure. And we're real people. Like, when you get to know your neighbors, you get to know all these different folks, and you see that they're just people like you with the same concerns. When you look at the news, when you look at social media, it's so divisive and otherizing that you think that these different people, that you'll never come to the table together because you have nothing in common.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to get beyond that. And I have a lot of appreciation for what you were saying about how RJC doesn't have the best social media presence, because you're focused on the connections.
Yeah.
And social media is a good tool for getting the word out these days and raising awareness.
Yeah.
But it's in one place, it's very much a one-sided relationship. You put the content out, people consume it, they can comment maybe, but it's hard to get a healthy conversation going.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it's a whole job to keep that content updated constantly. And if you're already doing a lot of work to make the world a better place, and you're already not being paid enough and don't have enough time, then to create a whole nother job just to take advantage of technology that's supposed to make this work easier, that's bogus.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing what we're doing, in the hopes of helping y'all do better what you're doing without having to worry about content creation, which is still useful and helpful. So if you can do it, help them out.
No, but I mean, if we look at COVID, and obviously, COVID still exists, but during the lockdown and during that really intense time of the pandemic, social media brought people together, and really RJC was uplifted through Zoom and through social media and through our email chains. But there is still a standstill. And so I see, a platform like Beacon that allows, kind of like a level up from Signal in a way of like, it's encrypted, it's safe, because so much of the work that we do needs to be encrypted because it's legal. But, at the same time,
they're criminalizing shit left and right.
Exactly.
Drag queen can't read a book to a child anymore.
Yeah, so it's like, it needs to be encrypted, and we need to be kept safe. And also, we need to be able to network. There are so many events happening so often, and you can't find it all on Instagram. Young people don't have Facebooks, and these Instagram and Facebook are just platforms that fall flat and are not safe and do not protect its users.
Right.
And so I see, a platform like Beacon that is interested in protecting its users, interested in that network building, as something so useful for activists, for movement shakers, because, it is a tool. Like, AI is a tool. Social media is a tool. We should be using it as a tool. Corporations should not have access to us like that, and should not be allowed to get us in trouble via what we think is private.
Right. For things that shouldn't be crimes in the first place.
Exactly.
I mean, there just needs to be some principle guiding the stewardship of these platforms. And when we're on social media, so far, everyone there is just there to make money.
Yeah.
So they've got nothing to gain by standing up to a police subpoena. Also, shout out to the platform we're testing right now. Actor actually takes, their organization is based in Denmark, which is the land of WikiLeaks. So they're giving us fully encrypted communication channels, as you were saying, fully encrypted data, and also all those servers, all that ownership right now, that's in Denmark. So I feel like I just trust them a little bit more than, say, like Texas. If like Texas tried to subpoena Beacon for information about, abortions or just any sort of organization, that data is going to be protected. They actually, because of the encryption, they don't have it. They couldn't give it over if they wanted to. But even if they could, they wouldn't want to, which is nice.
Yeah.
So it's good to be on a platform that has the people's back and is doing this for the right reasons. And good to be able to finally maybe have this technology to give you so that it can be used, because it's so frustrating just organizing on social media and trying to make things happen that way.
Yeah. No, very excited for all the movement work that's happening. And I don't know, I feel like I'm past the point in my life where I feel hope But I'm also past the point where I feel like great despair.
Sure.
You know, like I don't feel either.
Mm-hmm.
What I feel is a level of consistency and commitment to taking care of people and taking care of myself. And, you know, that looks like, you know, basic, you know, self-care practices, like making sure we're eating and drinking water, to like showing up for community.
Right.
And I think both of them are equally as important, and kind of helps with the whole like hope versus despair. I'm just like, no, we're just consistently showing up for each other and ourselves, and that is how like movement works.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's beautiful, and that's all you can do. And if everybody does that, if we all show up for ourselves and our own world, then the whole world could change that way. And if it doesn't, you know, we did our best and we made our world a little better for it. So
yeah, exactly.
I think, you got the right priorities, the consistency. We're in it either way. So
we're in it either way.
We just got to do our best.
Like, as much as I want the aliens to come and like
fix everything.
They're
going to be socialists, right?
I know, like they're going to be great, right?
Or redistribute the wealth.
Yeah. I feel like we put too much hope on the aliens. Like, I think we need to like give them a break a little bit.
Yeah. They might just be here to take pictures. And
like they might just be tourists.
We're gonna be like, give us healthcare. They're like, oh god.
Ew, I'm not actually investing in this. I'm just like, I'm on vacation right now.
You better get out of here. We're gonna get sick. Well, this has been really wonderful, Fél. Thank you so much for coming on. Before you go, is there a URL or website that people could go to if they want to give RJC money or get deeper involved and volunteer?
So we keep it very simple. RJCAVL, so Racial Justice Coalition Asheville, .org.
RJCAVL.org. Mm-hmm. And it'll be linked in all the descriptions. You can find the link on our website too. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off? No, just thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor, and I hope all of you out there have a beautiful day or night wherever you're at. Well, thank you so much, Fél, again. Really appreciate all the work you're doing. And take care, everybody. Bye. Join us next time. Bye-bye.
That's all for now, folks. If you have any questions, comments, kudos, or concerns about this episode, we would love to hear from you. Get in touch with our team directly by emailing connect@thebeaconnetwork.org. Start using Beacon today. Join the network now at www.thebeaconnetwork.org. Want to learn more and stay connected? Find us on Instagram @thebeaconnetwork, facebook.com/thebeaconnetwork, and twitter.com/network_beacon. But our favorite place to connect with you is on Beacon itself, so head to our website and join the conversation today. What are you waiting for? Beacon is a nonprofit. The app is free, we don't sell ads, we don't use algorithms, and we don't monetize human attention and connection. Instead, we ask everyone who can to contribute just a little each month so that Beacon can continue to develop and grow. If everyone gives a little, we will accomplish a lot. So consider giving just $5 or $10 a month to Beacon today. Make a one-time or recurring donation now at www.thebeaconnetwork.org/give. Thanks for tuning in to It's Time We Talked. Find a connection, pass it on.